Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this is Andor Candor, where we're talking all things Andor. This week, we are discussing episode number 6, The Eye, directed by Susanna White and written by Dan Gilroy. Holy moly.
Holy moly.
Holy moly.
Indeed.
Holy freaking moly. Okay, so I woke up to watch this episode. Full spoilers ahead, in case you haven't joined us before. I woke up this morning, 6:20, snoozed one time, and I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it today. I woke up, put it on. Within 10 minutes, I had so much adrenaline coursing through my veins. I just felt the tension of episode 6. I was wide awake. I was on the edge of my seat. I was sweating, cold sweat at like 7 in the morning.
I woke up at about 7 in the morning. Well, actually, I woke up at 4 in the morning. For some reason, my body's just like, 4 in the morning, get up, make sure the world is upright. And so I keep doing that these days. And this morning, I opened up. Lately, there's like, been a BTS update. Somebody's posted on Weverse, and like, I'm catching the news, So I open it up, and somebody's like, 53 minutes of greatness, and I was like, shit. 53 minutes. Here I am, spending this entire year complaining that like Star Wars episodes should be longer, because I'm like, oh, they have so much more time to tell a story. And I was so exhausted this morning that I was like, 53 minutes? No, that means I have to start it super soon, or I'm not going to be able to finish it before work. So I attempted to watch it on my TV, or like cast it from my phone, and my TV was just having none of that. So I had to go downstairs, and my family members were around and eating breakfast. I will be honest in saying that it was not the prime viewing experience that this episode deserved. But you know what? Sometimes we just suck it up and deal with it. There were no blankets downstairs. It was cold. Apparently, like my family just is like washing the blankets or like put them in other rooms. I'm like, what is that? What has happened? Anyway, the episode's great.
Dad, it's Andor Wednesday. You got to have those blankets washed Tuesday night on the dot.
Right. So I can be comfy cozy, for these episodes. Anyway, I live at home. So the episode was really good. My mouth was literally agape for like 10 minutes during this episode. And I don't know how to like not exaggerate about that, but like that's genuinely what happened. And then my mom laughed at me at one point. She's like, "Oh, it's so cool." I was like, "Shut up, Mom. You're mocking me right now. You're mocking me right now." So, it was really good. That's what I'm here to say.
I would probably say this is one of the best, if not the best episode of Star Wars television that we've ever seen. I think just the buildup of this arc alone into a very like gut punch climactic finale still hasn't taken the spot from the Marshal of the Mandalorian. 54 minutes. 54 minutes.
Really? Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But hey, second longest episode of Star Wars TV that we've ever gotten, which is notable. It's notable. I mean, I think the length of this episode and how much we got goes to show that, like you said, prime prestige Star Wars TV should be at least 40 to 50 minutes. And when we do get that sort of time, we really get to have this sort of amazing moment in television on Disney Plus. I mean, this is like one of the best things I've seen on Disney Plus since it's launched. It's so damn good.
We talk about like the length of shows, and I've been one that's like, oh, it could be 10 minutes longer. You could have done this with it. There was time to fill. We have this notion of like what TV looks like and like what a half-hour sitcom looks like versus an hour drama, et cetera, et cetera. If you've been alive for the past 10 years, like the Game of Thrones versus, like The Office. They're completely different sort of shows that run different times, or The Good Place, etc. And I don't think those lines are as rigid as we want to think they are with regards to quality and time. But it's about like maximizing the time that you do use. And I sometimes feel like some of the other Star Wars episodes are not maximizing the time that they do use, and could have, fleshed things out more, or given us a bit more of one scene here, or written 6 more pages of dialogue that were new scenes, pieces we could have used. And this episode really used every single second. Like, I don't think I'd want it to be longer, because it really maximizes the time that it uses. And I think this is the closest, by far, that we've gotten to quote unquote prestige TV, or film-like quality, or any of those things in a Star Wars. And I think it really raises the bar for what Disney Plus can do and for what Star Wars can do. And I'm not saying every Star Wars has to be like this because I don't think that, but like I think that this brand of Star Wars is a good one.
I love that last point you made because every show serves a different purpose, right? Like Obi-Wan Kenobi had a specific vibe and specific purpose, and that purpose is going to be different than what Andor gives, which is going to be different than what The Mandalorian does, and not that we can't have criticisms or say, maybe one show's writing is better than the other, because I think those are like valid criticisms for sure, but I do like how we have all these different flavors of Star Wars within television. But yeah, Andor I think is the closest that we've come to like the true prestige quality, because it is really just, it's so good. It's just so damn good. Like, not that all the other shows aren't, it's just like a new level of like, I don't even know. It just, I really feel like Susanna White, by the way, like directed a hell of an arc.
I fully agree. And I think this arc is written brilliantly as well. From Dan Gilroy, of Nightcrawler fame, which I just rediscovered recently, and it's one of those Oscar snubs I'll never not be upset about. Jake Gyllenhaal, Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I think Susanna White absolutely killed it. The cinematography with these outdoor scenes is beautiful. It's so tense and action packed and feels clear in its vision. And I really have to hand it to Susanna for her direction and the way that she kind of put the pieces together on this one. And I also have to hand it to Dan Gilroy for writing a really tight script. Like it's punchy. It's there,
Mm-hmm. When is Susanna White getting a Star Wars movie is my question. Actually, when are we getting any Star Wars movies? Allegedly,
Wow.
allegedly December 19th, 2025 is the day.
I don't think that's allegedly. I
day.
think that's the official calendar. Like, so that there's no like, it's not like you're pulling out of your butt, like that's
Right,
like something that they're putting out. We can say like, hopefully, like,
Hopefully, yes.
but that's what they've said. They've committed to that, even though they can renege on that commitment anytime, as they already have. Anyway,
anyways, we'll see if that happens. But I would say if we go back to making Star Wars movies, Susanna White, give her a series, give her anything else in Star Wars, because I think she's very talented, and I could see why they brought her in. I think you're right. The script for the show has been very punchy. I think episode 6 works similar to episode 3, where they're both these very explosive sequences and thrilling and nerve-wracking. You just feel like your blood pumping through your veins. You feel your own heartbeat while you're watching it. It only works because of the buildup. Like episodes 4 and 5 really did a great job laying the groundwork for us to not only care about Cassian, but to care about every single one of these characters. Like, people were like, "Oh, don't take any of my Aldhani babies. Don't take them away from us." Like, we were all worried, like, can't they just live all this once? Like Doctor Who, for once, everybody lives, We are saying that because the show took the time to give them each personality, such distinct personalities. And the performances given by each of these characters, hats off. I really was impressed.
Right. And the thing about these characters is they're built up over the 3 episodes. They're not glup shittos. They're like actual characters. The substance and story, with substance and story and people that really bring meaning to the story. And it's kind of crazy to me that we're getting this level of storytelling in the Star Wars. I mean, honestly, the only thing I think has gotten close in terms of like thematic content and like stakes for me is Last Jedi, in sort of like the maturity of the mindset, and that's really not to diss anybody, because I love Rogue One too, which I think also kind of hits on that in some ways, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, but I kind of love that we're getting these sorts of pieces from this kind of Disney era, and the way that they're handling the complexities of this time. I think maybe Obi-Wan comes close in some ways as well with regards to like interpersonal stories, but this one is like so big. Like, this conflict is so big and also so specific at the same time, which I think is great.
What I really love about how the show is starting to play out is the fact that every moment that we watch feels like a butterfly effect. And it is, because
Mm-hmm.
we know Cassian's going to end up on Scarif. We know he's going to make a choice to go to the top of that tower,
Right.
shoot Krennic, save Jin, beam the plans up, and do the mission, right?
Right.
And so it's like every moment that we are watching is leading up to that. So every person that is within Cassian's space and his orbit plays a role in that, whether or not they realize that each of those people are going to be, in effect, saving the rebellion, even if they don't feel like it in this moment. People like Nemik, people like
Mm-hmm.
Gorn, people like even Skeen, even though he turned out to be a terrible person in the end. Vel, Cinta, everybody played their part. And I feel like this episode gave a lot of Rogue One vibes in the sense that they did what they had to do and they pulled it off. Unfortunately, there were casualties along the way. But that is sometimes the cost of leading a rebellion. It's not easy. And you're going up against almost impeccable odds at that point. Like every single piece of this mission had to work out, and they almost got by without any of it falling apart. Like they were pretty tight. And I do like too that this episode started to have all that stuff fall apart towards the end as opposed to like up front. I feel like sometimes these heist movies and stuff, they fall apart really early in the heist. And I like how we mostly got through most of it in this to actually show like how close were they, versus like, oh, it falls apart right from the get-go.
Right. Like it wasn't about the scramble necessarily. Like that
Right.
wasn't the point of the telling the story. Yeah, so I agree with you on that. I think that I want to touch on something you said about Skeen, and I am jumping to the end of the episode here. But what I thought was so interesting about his character is what he defined his own rebellion as. And he said for Skeen, he goes, it means me rebelling against everyone else. And it reminds me, I think of something that maybe Tony Gilroy said, talking about like everyone's personal private rebellions. Like everybody rebellion means something different to everyone in the story. And I think we've gotten a lot of that with the Aldhani crew. Nemik, who's really, really passionate. Cinta, who we learned is kind of on a wants to avenge her family, perhaps. We don't quite know Vel's motivation, I think. We have Tamarin, who was a former stormtrooper. And then we have Skeen.
Love that, by the way.
Right. We have Skeen, who told us a story in the last episode, one that was, the most interesting lines of the episode. And then we learn in this one that it might not all be true. But within all of that, we learn why everybody is choosing to rebel in this moment. And so I don't want to go as far as saying like, oh, Skeen, like capital B, capital G, bad guy. But like he went through with that mission and he finished it. What was his gain going to be? So he was in it for himself. He was just, I think his nature was just selfish in that.
Yeah. He was like a true mercenary, and it's interesting because
Right.
Cassian was brought on as a mercenary to everybody else. At least that's what their knowledge of him was.
Nemik's
And
manifesto.
Skeen was the one. Yeah.
The role of
And
mercenaries
Skeen
in the
was,
galactic struggle for freedom.
yeah. I love that title. I think they should release it as a Star Wars book. Like immediately, I'd read it.
Here's the deal. I was a poli-sci and history double major in college. That shit is right up my alley. Like, give me a spicy white paper, like.
While
Anyway.
we're on the topic of Nemik, I would say Nemik is somebody who is probably the MVP of this episode. And when I'm talking about people who saved the rebellion, he is definitely somebody that I'm going to continue to think of, and I think Cassian will continue to think of, and I'll explain why here in a second.
Yeah.
Because certain words that are now triggering for me in Star Wars. But Nemik starts off with this quote in the beginning. He says, "Weapons are tools. Those that use them are, by an extension, assets that we must use to our best advantage. The Empire has no moral boundaries. Why should we not take hold of every chance we can? Let them see how an insurgency adapts." It's an interesting quote, and I'd love to hear like what your thoughts are on it. But to me, it sort of showed that because the Empire has no moral boundaries and they are like a fascist regime, you kind of have to fight fire with fire.
Right.
because that's just what they have to do to fight the Empire, right? And I think that's kind of what the manifesto here is saying. It's like that's how the insurgency has to adapt. It's people like Saw Gerrera who have to adapt that way, to very extreme measures. You know, it's interesting. I don't know what you made of this quote.
Well, Brad, if you recall, the words of Jorah Malley, or maybe it wasn't Jorah Malley, it was somebody else on the council. Maybe
Might have been Yariel Poof.
Yariel Poof. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But in that one scene in Light of the Jedi, where they say, "Well, what is peace without justice?" That, I think that's what this idea is approaching. Like, the system is unjust. There are, rules and regulations and laws and oppressive measures to keep people in their place, and these measures are, quote unquote, right within the sense of the society, but they are not morally just. And understanding that they're not morally just allows people who are fighting against those powers to have a broader understanding of what is right, if that makes sense, and what is necessary in order to fight those powers. So I think that's kind of what's being attacked here by Nemec, and I think that that's really complex thinking for a Star War. Yeah, and I love when we kind of touch on these ideas of what is right and what is true and what is justice. And I think there's a point in the episode 2 where he's like, "Do you not care about justice? And are you're just thankful that the empire," and then Cassian comes up and he's like, "Do I look thankful?" It's like, yeah. That's exactly the energy here. Is we all might come at it for different reasons and because of different stories, but understanding where the regime has directly harmed people allows people to kind of have a broader understanding of what is necessary.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because I think the series so far has definitely painted an unjust galaxy, and I think this mission is a great example of like having to operate within that. Somebody like Gorn, who when he finally comes down into the vault at the end and Behaz sees him, he goes, I should have you hung. And Gorn says, 7 years working for you, I deserve a lot worse. Right. And I thought that was such an interesting line, because think about how much time of his life he spent working for the Empire for this one mission. It's like the ultimate form of gaslighting. Like he has put in the time.
Part of the question, I think, with Gorn is like, has he spent all 7 years with that same level of rage and of wanting to do justice? Because we learn about his story, and it was he fell in love with somebody who was Aldhani, and then I forget the specifics of it. Like, either she was killed or they had to move.
She was killed. Yeah.
She was killed. Yeah. So clearly, at least part of that time he was there doing his job and didn't necessarily feel perhaps the strong moral, I hate to say the word, like, strong moral viewpoint. Viewpoint is a good word. That was not a strong personal moral viewpoint. That was not the one that was imposed upon him by the regime, if that makes sense. Okay. What I said when we were off air for a second was using your own morality to understand the system and its injustice, as opposed to going along with the system's morality and like letting it impose its morality upon you. Right. Okay. Yeah, so that's what we're getting at. And I think
continuing to fight against that system, no matter what.
Right. And I think that Gorn made that switch when his love was killed. He kind of went from the system imposing its morality on him to him waking up and understanding his own viewpoint of morality within the system.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to Nemec's point. Like, let them see how an insurgency adapts. Like, why shouldn't Gorn take hold of that chance of like, hey, he's already in a position of power. Right. Yes, he just lost this promotion and he lost the woman he loved, but like, how can he now use his position and privilege to their advantage, to the rebellion's advantage? And like, sure, I'm sure he's had to do some terrible things in his time serving as a disheveled imperial person, right? And like, imagine the toll it takes. Like, even the way that the Imperials in the beginning are talking about the Aldhanis, and I find it really interesting too. Yeah. I find it so interesting that they call them just Donnies, I feel like that is a bit of a derogatory way to refer to them as in the Star Wars universe. Like it feels kind of like shorthand, like almost like a jab at them. The way that he's sort of lingering in the background during these conversations, and they're like, "Hey, can we build a base here?" He's like, "What choice do they have?" What the Aldhanis don't have a choice here, but like in his mind, he knows he doesn't believe that. Like he's living a life of
Right.
cognitive dissonance. It's brutal.
Right. Right. I really want to talk about the language that, and I do not have his name, but this guy who in the trailers he was drinking the cup and everybody was like, oh yeah, that guy, he's an Imperial, who I thought was Co Bibble for a second.
It's Commandant J-Hold Behaz, and then
J-Hold,
he's played by Stanley Townsend, and then Richard Katz as Colonel Pettigar, who's the engineer from Coruscant.
Right. So Biaz here, he is speaking some language of colonization, of dehumanization. It is incredibly explicit the ways he is with which he is dehumanizing the Aldhani people, and it is jarring to see in a Star Wars, not because it is untrue in any way, but because it is so close to our real world. You could map that onto any sort of colonizer talk, because it is the language of us versus them. It is the language of domination. And he calls them they're a simple people. They breed sad traits that make them like vulnerable to manipulation. I mean, he does not think of them as people.
Mm-mm.
And that is so clear. And for the moment when Pettigar is like, well, isn't this valley their sacred land? And so casually, Biaz is like, it doesn't matter. They'll be back. We have to have hands to make the things we're planning on building. And, Biaz thinks he is smarter than them. He thinks he is more human than them. He thinks he is more dignified than them. He thinks
their culture is lesser than, like when he talks about giving them the goat hide, and he talks about how bad it smells, and he's like, anyway, anything to get away from the stink of this, it's like it is dehumanizing, totally.
Right.
Disgusting.
And I think it like serves as a strong reminder of not just, colonialism with Star Wars, but like the legacy of colonialism in the world, in our world, and the ways in which colonialist thinking, I can speak from a framework of here in the US of like people who are quote unquote the norm, or the nuclear family, right? These sort of ideas that are so present, and that norm being very white, house, 2.5 kids, that those sorts of ideas, and the way that they work to other everybody else. Yeah, I don't know. I think it serves as a reminder of the ways, big and small, that our people in power are dehumanizing others, that the ways in which each of us individually might in small ways like dehumanize others. I don't know. I thought this was a really, really stark scene, and the ways in which that thinking becomes dominant very quickly, with the way that Pettigar is completely trounced upon by Biaz there. So yeah, and then you can see like Gorn's face just kind of sit in this very stoic sense, but you can kind of just see him grimacing.
You can see the pain. You can see the pain behind those eyes for sure. And think about all the years that he's had to listen to this and like agree with it, like on the front, right? To the public, like he's had to play that part.
Right. So anyway, I am off the small soapbox, my little step stool here, about the language of colonization, but I just thought that was incredibly, incredibly stark and powerful, and really important to show the Empire acting in this specific mindset.
Okay, so the heist mission itself, what were your expectations? Because I had a feeling things were going to go very poorly. The moment that Gorn died, I was like, okay, we're starting. And then Terramin died. I'm like, okay. And then Nemec got crushed by a moving cart. And I was like, that did not sound good. That was honestly one of the most brutal
I thought he was dead right there.
Uh, yeah, I think it was the crunch that
It
really
was the
made me like,
crunch.
oh my god, that's honestly the worst thing to watch.
Right.
And then Skeen, Cassian kills Skeen. Did you feel like this was gonna be Cassian's Rogue One prequel? That he was gonna, his first and last heists are of epic disasters. Yeah. What did you
Well,
think?
firstly, I think that's kind of the nature of rebellion, and especially within this Star Wars galaxy, that it is at war. Secondly, that time I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning. Shout out to the one person who I don't follow who ended up on my timeline who did the spoilers and then like three dot dot dots and then like when so and so and so and so died, and I was like, oh Jesus Christ, and
Oh,
then
jeez.
and then I saw another tweet that was like, only one or two of these people is going to make it out alive. And there was a quote tweet and it was like, I'm sorry. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, kind of expected that. And then, but like also I was kind of going into the framework of like Tony Gilroy saying that like heads will roll this season. He's like, nobody's precious.
He did
And
say
so like,
that, yes.
I'm not going in with any expectations. Honestly, like I'm going, like, we talk about what we're speculating and what kind of thoughts we're having, but this is really a show where I am doing my darndest to not put any expectations on like what the story itself is actually going to be. Like, I'm letting it unfold in front of me. I'm really trying not to get my hopes up too much or put too much weight on it. And honestly, like, this is a show that I'm really enjoying watching, but I'm not thinking about all of the time. And it's not because I don't think it's great. I do think it's great. It's just eliciting a different sort of, I think I talked about this last week, just like a different sort of emotional and thoughtful reaction from me than other Star Wars shows have. So yeah, I'm just not thinking about it in the same way that I, thought about it in Obi-Wan. And that's okay. Like, but yeah, I point being, I really didn't have a lot of expectations for this heist at all. So I was just like, okay, we're on the ride now.
It's hard not to ask that question. Like, when we've been leading up 2 episodes of this and,
Right.
the end of episode 5 is Luthen being really anxious and scared about what's going to happen. Like, we know the rebellion like probably needs these credits in order to function. So I think the stakes couldn't have been higher. And so for me, that's what I felt throughout the episode. Is like, I want everybody to make it out. If they don't, that's okay. Like, I understand it's part of the show and let the story unfold. But like, I want the best for these people. And so I think once they started dropping, I went, oh no, my sweet precious babies, they're all dying. I've known them for 2 episodes and I want to protect them. Especially Nemec, because I think Nemec has become a fan favorite in 3 episodes. And him in particular is really brutal because I think Cassian grew the closest to him just in a lot of the conversations that they had. I think Cassian is going to remember Nemec for many years to come. And we know Nemec specifically leaves his manifesto with Cassian.
Right.
He wants Cassian to keep it. Like, what is in that manifesto? Yeah, I think that is something that is very deliberate to do. They make a point to emphasize it. And I think many of the things that maybe we hear in Rogue One, Cassian say, are from that manifesto, such as rebellions are built on hope. Is that something that was an idea planted within that manifesto, and Cassian latched onto that idea, and that's kind of what helped change him and ignite a new fire within him. This whole heist and the death of Nemec specifically is something that's going to stick with him for quite some time, and is going to, I think this is what really starts that path towards Rogue One Cassian.
Totally. And I think that we begin to see it even before the end of the episode. It's not just the manifesto being given to Cassian. It's the fact that Cassian makes the choice to kill Skeen because he believes that it is more about more than just himself or Skeen. So like, that was a deliberate choice. And it's not a choice that one makes lightly. But I think that was a powerful moment for Cassian to kind of realize, oh, this is actually kind of where I stand. And then I think he was confronted with that when Vel hands him the manifesto datapad, and he's like, oh, no, that's not me, but it becomes him. It totally becomes him. And one thing I was thinking about just now is this idea of death and we've been talking about like the comparison to Rogue One, for this whole episode so far. And it's so interesting to me because when we watch Rogue One and when we go through the story of Rogue One, we meet this team, we love this team, and every single one of them dies.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do they die, but they all die heroically. They all get their moment, you know? We're crying because of K2 on the ground. We're crying because of Jin Cassian at the end. We are sad about Bodhi and his end. We are sad about Baze and Shuret and the love that they shared with one another and like their camaraderie. This episode paints that picture of loss and rebellion so much more bleakly and truer to like capital R reality. We see Gorn like get shot in the he's just in like the background of the frame and like Vel's in the foreground. It's like her shoulder and like over her shoulder and you see him like fall out of frame. And then when Terraman gets shot, it's just before like they're about to make it and about like 1.5 seconds is spent on it and then they have to keep going. They have to keep running like right now. They have to go now. Nemec getting crunched is absolutely like the emotional core of that bit. Is it kind of what it propels the rest of the episode and where they're going? But like it's so brutal and upsetting and sad, but you don't get the time to think about those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You have to just keep moving, and the episode really paces itself in that way.
It's really interesting too. Like when I draw the comparisons, if we look at heists in Star Wars, the only other heist that we've truly seen is Solo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in that Han Solo surrounded by death, right?
Right.
We see Jon Favreau's character die. I'm blanking on his name right now. We see Val die. We see so many people die.
Val.
And Han Solo, you know, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm blanking on the character's name. Rio Durant, that's his name. When Rio,
Grease, and I was like, it's not Grease.
When Rio says like, you know, it's not good to die alone, kid. And that sort of ignites Han's need to stick around with Chewie and find family with Chewie. And then here we have Cassian Andor, you know, his first true heist mission, regardless of however he got that Star Path unit. I don't know if that's a separate heist that we might see in a flashback at some point. But this is the one where he's going up against Imperials. People are dying around him. He's kind of alone on this mission. He leaves to be alone. We don't know where he's going. Like, where is he off to next? Is he going to now feel like he wants a larger sense of purpose? Like if he was willing to kill Skeen in order to save the rebellion and rise above his own selfish desire for credits, is that going to incline him to now join a group when he sees how close all of these people were together and the loss that Vel feels for Nemec? So it's interesting to see if Han Solo and Cassian Andor will have this same change of heart due to a kind of quote unquote failed heist. This one a little bit more successful, but the same fatalities.
What if Cassian finds himself at Saws? Could there be a world in which that happens? I was, well, as you were talking, I was trying to think about the timeline and how that all goes down. It seems like that crew kind of turns over a bit. But I mean, I guess in Rogue One, if they knew each other, they wouldn't necessarily have to, you know, acknowledge each other when the world is falling apart. Well,
we do see Luthen talking to Saw Gerrera in the trailers, so it's
exactly.
possible.
So I'm trying to figure
Luthen
out how
could bring him to there.
Right. I'm trying to figure out how these characters come back together, because Cassian has given his Kyber necklace to Vel and he's going on his way. Right. And we know that Vel is somehow connected to Luthen. Right. So they've gone their separate ways, but this is a show called Andor. How do we get them back together? Because I'm assuming they come back together. We've got 2 full more arcs, you know?
Right. And Cassian's going to end up with Mon Mothma. Like, how's it all going to transpire? I think that's the most fascinating thing about the series. And like, when does that happen? Is that a season 1 thing? Is it a season 2 thing? Like, when do we get to that point?
Right.
Remains to be seen. Speaking more though, like on the levity of the heist and just a traumatic moment of sorts.
Levity, trauma. Okay, what's up?
Levity, trauma, Star Wars. It's tragic. I mean,
you said kind of like levity and trauma in the same breath, so I just like, what are you about to say? What are you about to say?
I want to talk about Nemec's line when they're flying the ship, and
okay, Christ.
You know,
all right.
I have to say, the Eye of Aldhani, the TIE fighter chase through that
Can we
one of the
can we
most
just let's pause.
thrilling things I've ever seen.
Let's pause. Well, we can talk about that line that we're about to talk about in a second, but let's pause and talk about the TIE fighters for a second, because when
Yes.
the klaxon is blaring and like the TIE pilots are like walking down that very elevated walkway to like get to the ladders to get to their ties, my jaw just dropped. And I was like, oh my freaking God. Because the tension is so high and you've never seen them so scary or intimidating or out to get you. And we've been talking about TIE fighters for a lot of the series and how in like the past Aldhani episodes, when they would screech down the canyon, there would be such a fear and a like a soundscape to that. And like, oh my God. Then there were like TIEs chasing after Cassian and they were, oh my God, so good.
Yeah, I just think it's so fascinating how Andor has made me fear TIE fighters. Like I would never have thought. You know, we see them in the OT. They're kind of like these like clanky ships. You're like, oh, you could shoot that down with like one laser, pretty easy. But
Right,
like here, they feel big, and the scale of that person going into that cockpit, you feel the scale of the TIE fighter. I think like similar to the Mandalorian and the Sanctuary when we get the ATST. You feel the scale of that beast when it's coming through the trees chasing the Mandalorian. Whereas like in Empire Strikes Back, they're like these little chicken walkers that are kind of like walking funny in the background on Hoth. You're like, those are just chicken walkers, you know? And now you feel like, oh my God, these are actually kind of terrifying and deadly, right? And so same thing with the TIEs here. I think it's really brilliant to take these small things that have been so familiar to us and make us feel a new way about them. But I think the Aldhani chase sequence is one of the best things I've seen in Star Wars. I think the Eye of the Storm or the Eye of the Aldhani.
Now we're just thinking about all the Star Wars eyes. The Eye of the Storm, right.
Marchion Ro, yeah. It was beautiful.
Let's talk about the soundscape of that as well, because we were just talking about the TIE fighter soundscape. The sound that the Eye, event makes is so striking, and it feels like a foreign sound in that soundscape. It's so dramatic and so loud and screeching in its own way that it feels elevated within the soundscape of Aldhani. And I just was like, wow, it really added to the tension in a beautiful way. And like, my God, if this series is doing one thing really, really well, it is the sound. They're also doing all the other stuff really, really well. But like the score and the sound mixing and editing is just wild in this series.
Yeah. Speaking of the sound, I have to mention Cinta, when she came down that ladder and shot Petagar. I was like, wait, that blaster sounds familiar. She's using a Naboo blaster.
Oh my God.
Like the Naboo the ones
that is such a specific realization. I love that. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I didn't even put that together. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and when you look at her blaster when she's holding it, it's literally just the Naboo blaster, like that Captain Panaka uses in Phantom Menace. I'm pretty sure. So, that was cool. Love the sound. Love that sound. I love the resurgence of prequel sounds in Star Wars.
Right. Absolutely. I had another thing to say about sound before we moved on to the line. Oh, it wasn't about sound. It was about sight. My other comment is, I think when we were talking about the trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, this scene where Cassian is piloting the ship is like one of the most beautiful Star Wars things we've ever kind of gotten, just in the colors and the way that where the camera's moving through it. It reminds me of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, which I'm very fond of, very close to my heart, honestly. And just the way that colors worked in those. And I think there was a similar scene in one of those where like the Enterprise is like coming down on Earth and they're going to crash land, essentially. It gave me those vibes in the best way. So I just have to bring it back to Star Trek for the second time in this arc. So first was Gorn, second was this one. Thank you.
Also, when are we getting the Eye of Aldhani Star Tours ride is my question.
Oh, heck. The way we would ride Star Tours all day in order to get that.
But like, hey, so we're adding the Andor expansion to Star Tours. You and I both book a trip out to wherever is close, probably Florida is closest at this point, and then we go to Star Tours and we ride it for 10 straight days, like 7 times a day.
You think I have the money to do 10 straight days in either Florida or California?
We gotta hit 70 times on Star Tours somehow.
70 times on Star Tours. That would be amazing, first of all. But I mean, oh God, I love Star Tours so much. This would be so cool in Star Tours. I
I
love Star
know.
Tours. I love
I don't know
Star
why I
Tours.
picked
Okay.
number 70, but it just felt right.
Well, we've done what, 8 so far?
Yeah.
8 Star Tours rides
Yeah.
together. So we've only got like a few left to keep going. We just got to get on a schedule, you know?
Yeah, yeah. How about we do 69 more times? That way we hit 77.
77, yeah. And
And
then we can
1977 is when Star Wars came out. So
right, and then we can also
so
you can
69 more times, nice, you know. So
exactly.
it all
We have
adds
to go,
up. It's all
nice. Yeah.
yeah, nice on
So
the 69th time. Yep.
for like us being like 12-year-olds and like for the stupid meme and then, also
We're Star Wars
77
podcasts,
1977 Star
yeah.
Wars. Yeah.
We're
I think
very
it'll work.
self-referential here, yes.
Right. I think that's an excellent plan. I think you should keep all of this in the episode. And
Also, our
I think we should write it
to our
down.
Patreon is in the show notes. So if you want to join our Patreon and help us hit our 69th more time at Star Tours,
God.
feel free to join our Patreon.
On it, maybe we should make that a stretch goal. Like,
Yeah.
fund the Star Tours trip. That'd be so silly.
So,
Okay.
when we hit $3,000 on Patreon, we're gonna go on Star Tours 69 times.
That might almost be too much of a meme for us. Anyway, we have derailed.
I know.
Okay, but let's talk about the real reason why we're here in this conversation,
Yes.
and it's because of the
Yes.
word. Would you like to say it?
Climb.
Yeah, but that was quite the impression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're just strolling along, going through the Eye of Aldhani, just super cash. I'm like, oh, great. Vel injects the med pack into Nemec. I'm like, great. He's got a second wind. Let's do this, boy. Let's get those coordinates.
Right. Very intense.
It's like an EpiPen, basically.
Right. It is, though.
And Nemec is giving Cassian Andor directions, and he goes, climb. And I go, oh, no. Oh God, don't say it again. He goes, you need to climb. And Cassian's like, climb? What do you mean? I'm like, God, please don't say it again. And not only does he say it again, but in the captions, it goes screaming, climb. And I'm just like, I hate you, Tony Gilroy. You're paying for my therapy bill. Because for those of you who probably know where I'm going, Rogue One, the last words that K2SO ever says to Cassian Andor are, climb. You must climb. And then he slams on the table and dies. And Cassian realizes
slams on
he
the
has
table
to climb.
and then he falls to the ground and then he dies.
Yes, yeah, shuts off. So now I think that is a very obvious intentional connection there. I think that is extremely intentional. We are not stretching here. I imagine they did this on purpose. I think it's very interesting that Cassian's first and last heist are using that word, and it's with two people who are about to die. And it kind of recontextualizes how I'm going to watch Rogue One now, because when I think of Cassian in that vault with Jin, and he hears K2SO in the radio going, climb, climb. Cassian knows to trust K2SO because he trusts Nemec when Nemec told him to climb, despite Cassian going, why would we climb? That doesn't make any sense. But he did it anyways, and they made it out of there alive. And so now I got to imagine, not only does Cassian trust K2 because it's K2, but I got to imagine he's in that vault thinking, oh my God, this is bringing back Nemec. It's bringing back when Nemec told me this and the importance of that moment. And I failed Nemec then. I won't fail K2 now. And he does it. So
right.
I don't know. How did you feel about this? I personally am not over it. Yeah.
I don't know if I reacted to it as strongly as you did. I immediately recognized the connection. And I was like, oh, they did it. But it didn't hit me in the same way. But Nemec is the key to all of this, Nemec is the key.
He is the key.
So I think it was a clever parallel without being too aggressively in your face about it being a parallel. And I think that's one that it thematically is really resonant. And ouchie. It's really thematically resonant and ouchie is my official declaration.
I was like, well, how else could it have been in your face? Nemec being like, climb. And by the way, Cassian, if anybody ever tells you to climb again, make sure you climb. And then he just dies.
How could it be more in your face? Well, it's just the way that they're choosing to make the parallel.
Yeah. I'm just kind of memeing here.
It could have been emotionally framed in the same way. And it's not. This episode and Rogue One are not emotionally framed in the same way. That's again what I kind of was talking about earlier with the way that people are dying.
Yeah.
But
it's there if you want to see it.
It's obvious, but it's not take you out of the episode obvious.
Yeah, like people going like, "Am I supposed to know something here?" You know, it's
Right,
not
right,
that
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of reference,
It's
but
yeah.
yeah. I just
Anyway,
thought it'd be funny if he said that though to the camera. He looks at the camera and goes, "Make sure you climb, Cassian, in
you
the
know what?
future."
Maybe
It'd be
Star
kind of
Wars should
funny.
write the fourth wall more often. That'd
They
be
go back
kind
and
of
re-edit Solo. Remember Han Solo, if you ever shoot first. I mean, I guess Solo
or
does do
or
that with
like
Beckett.
or like you're right, it does. Um uh that movie, if you just wanted to turn it into like a true comedy, which I guess that's the reason why Lord and Miller were fired, but like if you wanted to turn it into a comedy, you could start having Han Solo look straight at the camera and be like, and that's why my name is Solo.
It
Right?
feels
Like
very
stuff like that.
She-Hulk, which is why I'm loving She-Hulk so much when they were like teasing the Daredevil cameo and she's like, "Oh, did you guys think there was going to be a cameo this episode, but we're going to a wedding?" Well, yeah, because weddings are inconvenient and they come at the worst part of the season, you know, and like them going to a whole wedding episode instead of Daredevil and people were like, "Where's Daredevil?"
That's I didn't know that. That's funny. That's
Yeah.
comedy. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Daredevil, I think we need more fourth wall breaks in Star Wars. I would love that.
Imagine
Yes.
like Kaz breaking the fourth wall, just looking straight at the camera and being like, "I'm the rebel spy."
Yeah.
Anyway,
In The Mandalorian, when Grogu can finally talk and he goes, "Daddy," and then Mandalorian looks at the camera and goes, "Yeah, I'm your daddy." And then everybody on Twitter like loses their mind because
that
Din Djarin's hot as heck.
or it's comedy and he goes, "Daddy?"
Can you guys tell we're trying to cope with this episode by like bringing humor into it? This is like a very serious episode of Andor, and we're just here talking about like fourth wall breaks that we want to
To
see
be
in Star
clear, we've
Wars.
also talked about justice and colonization. We contain
True,
multitudes on
true.
this podcast.
Yeah. Inside of you, there are two podcasters. That's how I feel right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we had more time, we'd probably be the meme podcasters more often, But we try and be
Yeah.
serious people. We're adults, serious
Yeah.
academic
Professionals.
types, professionals. We do this. We make
Yeah.
tons of dollars. Just LOL, just kidding. Is there anything else that you want to hit on that we feel like we should talk about? Super important things in this episode before we kind of move on to our ands and ors, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I would say I'm very glad that Vel survived. I was kind of worried they were going to kill off the lesbian couple in Star Wars because that would not have been cool. So I wish them the best. I hope that Vel goes back for Cinta.
Yeah, Cinta was left.
They could go live on a farm somewhere, take their 80 million credits, start a brewery.
Nah, they're gonna do at least 2 more heists. They're rebels through and through.
Their date night is purely heists. I do love that they held hands in this, by the way. I thought that was like really important to take that moment. And again, like when we talk about episodes being 53 minutes, you make space for that sort of moment. What about you? Any final thoughts on this?
Final thoughts. Let's see. I wanted to talk about the tension in this episode. We've kind of talked about how, tight this tension is throughout the episode, how we're really just like on the edge of our seats and it's really moving forward at a great pace. The action is all there. We could definitely see this on the big screen. Guys, re-release it in theaters. I'm not even joking.
Please.
This is not a joke. And one of the things I thought was interesting about this heist, is like there are stories where you get to the big climactic part and it's an explosion, right? And it's like, wow, the explosion was so big and now everything has gone to shit. Or the explosion was so big and now we've succeeded. And we're all walking away from the explosion or like hiding from the explosion. There's an explosion in this episode, but literally all it does is like disable the systems that will release the pads or the belts on the pallets of credits, right? The tension doesn't really break in that moment until like a couple seconds later when Skeen yells, "Let's go!" And then like the pace picks back up and you're kind of like on it again. That moment of like, okay, you're expecting the explosion to be the big moment and it's not. It literally just releases the belts that hold the credits down. And then we're kind of like, okay, and then the and happens. And I think that was just a really interesting way to we love, Star Wars fandom does not get triggered about the word subversion of expectations at all. But I think it did subvert like the typical expectations that we have from the heist story tropes. And I really thought that was cool.
And I also love throughout the episode how there's so much indecision with some of our characters, or like hesitation. Like
Right.
even though they've been preparing for
Belle.
this for so long, Vel has that hesitation on top of the dam. Like she's kind of scared to jump off with the bungee. She's like, "Is this secure? Are we doing this? Are we doing this?" And they're like, Valley One, are you there? Are you there? Like Echo, come in, Echo, come in. Um,
Mhm.
and ultimately she does jump off, which by the way I loved. I loved that moment. And I loved also too during the episode how we kept cutting back and forth between the heist and the Aldhanis doing
Oh,
doing
singing.
their chants. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved that. I love that so much. And I thought it was a great juxtaposition, a great way to make you feel your heart race even more because you feel like their singing is building up to that
The
eye
sound.
of the Aldhani, and the sound coming and all the meteor showers coming. And you're like, okay, every time we hear them singing, we know we're getting closer and closer and closer to that window of time that they need to escape.
Mm.
And like, are they going to get to it? Are they going to make it in time? Like, this is a race against time. It's not just a heist. It's like they got like 14 minutes to go.
Right.
And I do love the moment too where the ship zooms out and we get that shot from inside the radio tower with all the people who are still handcuffed,
Oh,
and
it
you
was
just get
so
that
good. It was
shot
so good.
with the ship's front and center and all of
Yeah.
their eyes just looking at it. I'm just like, God damn, that's just such a brilliant shot.
That, and
So
then
good.
when the ship is blasting out of the port there, and everybody who's left there, like either them or their bodies get like pushed back because of like the force
Yeah.
of the ship moving, and I thought that was like a really interesting detail as well. Um, but kind of jumping back to the Aldanis and their singing, I thought it was really interesting, as you mentioned, it's a juxtaposition. But it's also a juxtaposition of like the realities that every one of these groups is living in, right? Like the Aldanis, being themselves and celebrating their traditions despite what's going on around them. And then Cassian and the Aldhani crew, the rebel crew, who are fighting for their lives against the larger backdrop of this repressive regime, who is affecting the people who are just trying to live their life and their culture. So it's kind of like a circle of the ways that these elements are being juxtaposed in the episode. And I thought it was really interesting the way that they intercut those. And I agree with what you were saying about that.
hmm And then last but not least, we end the episode on Coruscant, which brilliant stuff. Mothma in the Senate. We got it.
Talking about the Gormans.
Gormans. That Tony Gilroy knows his rebels. Let me tell you, that's gonna continue to come up. I
Yeah.
would not be surprised if we see Mothma's speech from Rebels in Andor about the Gorman massacre. Like if
Like
we
in the
see
second
that in live
season.
action. Yeah.
Mm.
Hell, I think we could see the Ghost Crew. Anyways, I digress. I loved seeing her in the Senate. I love the Imperial Security Bureau just losing its mind, and like everybody's going to be working the late night because of what just happened.
Right.
And last but not least, we get Luthen Rail in his shop, and I love the guy in the corner. The guy in the corner goes, "Anything from Aldhani?" And I don't know if you read this at first, but I thought Luthen at first when he turned around was like, "Oh God, my cover's blown. The mission failed. Somebody's here to arrest me because they know about my whole operation." And then when he sees the guy in the corner and
Right.
the guy's just like, "Oh, I just want a new piece of jewelry. Did you see like this on the news?" And then he's like a sigh of relief, like, "Oh, this guy's not here to arrest me. He's informing me." And then he goes to the back, has that kind of sigh of relief, and just laughs because he's like, "I made it. I made it out. Like we're good. We did it."
Right. And I think he's also specifically thinking about probably Vel, and Cassian. But like that moment, I think he does feel like he's been caught, or that things have gone terribly wrong and he's done. Like there's that moment of what has happened, and I think he
Because you don't
doesn't.
see who's saying it. Could be a security officer.
You don't see what the news is either, but then he has to like walk away and then allow himself to feel that sense of relief. So I don't know. I think him laughing at the end. I'm watching it kind of right now, and it's such a moment. It's such a moment. And what a great way to end the first half of the season, and to kind of put us in the middle of like the moment before and the moment after, and like that is the middle point.
Yeah, and I think for a heist episode too, it's not again like the traditional way you'd think a heist episode might end. Like you'd think it would end with the people who did the heist versus like the guy who sort of orchestrated it in the background and just him kind of having a moment to himself in like his back storage area. Like it's just so
Right.
quaint and personal, and a great way to see like what his character is like and how relieved he is. And if that is his daughter, if Vel is his daughter, I'm sure he is relieved as well.
Sure.
Which I still think there is a familial connection there. So we'll see. All right, I think we've kind of come to the end here. So we're gonna do our segment and or.
Okay,
I actually have a great or for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, I've got a very silly or. Can we do our two ors?
We're gonna. Well, we should do ands first because we got the and the or.
We gotta start with.
We're gonna go in order here. You know, we're professionals.
Would you like to start on an and, or would you like me to start on an and?
Please start. Yes.
Okay. The two highlights of this episode for me were the visuals and the sound, which makes up everything. And that's the same. But really, I think that the visual style of the outdoor locations of the TIE fighters, the load-in, the eye were all beautiful and brilliant. And I think that the sound of the eye, of the ships, and of the singing, like all really made this episode what it was. That's my and.
Yeah, those are great. For me, my two highlights were Nemec being the hero despite his circumstance.
Yes.
And Gorn playing the part until the very end. I thought Gorn is somebody who, even when they were caught red-handed, is like, this is an unauthorized mission. You're not supposed to be here. Like, he played the part. He kept trying to play the part. It was a desperate plea. Did not work out for him, but I applaud the effort. Also, honorable mention to our first person pissing in Star Wars onto a rock. I think we can't go this hour without mentioning that.
I can't believe you decided to say that.
When we talk about Andor pushing boundaries, we got shit, we got ass, and now we got some peeing.
Oh,
so what's next? And we got sex in Star Wars. This show is giving us everything.
God's light. In this episode, we were like, "Oh yeah, and we have to ride Star Tours 69 more times." And then we've strayed so far from God's light. Anyway, I have an or for you.
It's been a long week at work. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Wednesdays, I don't know. I think okay. Wednesday is a complicated day for releases for me. Wednesdays are the tough day at my new job. But we're here, it's fine. My or for you is Hexpa, Hexa, or Hoxla.
What?
I was like, I don't know if you're going to catch that. There's a point where some of the Imperials are playing a game. They're like gambling. And they lay down these hexagonal cards. And the first one, he says Hexba, Hexba. And then the next one goes Hexa. And then the last guy goes Hoxla. And everybody's like, oh man, like he clearly lost. So the Hoxla guy clearly won. So my question for you, Hexpa, Hexla, or Hoxla? Choose wisely.
I feel like I'm feeling Hexla.
Feeling Hexpa? Yeah.
It's spooky season. I think of like a hex, putting a hex on somebody. Yeah. Well, feels very October.
Totally. And there's my silly thing of the day.
Cool. So my or for you is you are in need of a life-saving surgery.
The answer is no, I'm not going to Dr. Quadpa.
Would you rather go get surgery from Dr. Quadpa, or would you rather get surgery from Ochi of Bestoon, who is basically Dr. Quadpa's evil brother?
No. You can't. No, Ochi of Bestoon triggers my fight or flight, and I choose flight.
Ochi's got the knife. That's his surgical tool. So
I'm
keep that in mind. His Ochi's dagger. I knew it.
I'm so mad about this.
Everybody, listeners, clip it. She said it here. Keep the receipts. Sarah is going to Dr. Quadpa.
No, I'm not. Not of my own will. I will not do it. I can't. I don't know what it is about that look of character. Ochi of Bestoon gives me no.
He gives the ick.
He gives the ick. Major ick. And Dr. Quadpa makes me feel very similarly.
I do want to say though, like from a puppet standpoint or like an animatronic really standpoint though, I still think it's really good.
I was thinking about how they pulled it off.
Quadpa is played by Aiden Cook. He's a puppeteer who's actually worked on Force Awakens, Rogue One, Last Jedi. He played Baba Joe from Jakku. Remember like the very first creature that we saw from The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams, when he did that like behind the scenes video where he was walking on the Jakku set, and he's like, I think it was for Make-A-Wish or something, or
I don't know if I've ever seen
Force
this.
for Change. Yeah, it was for Force for Change. It was one of the first videos that we ever got. He's talking to Baba Joe. It was very interesting.
I literally, when I say I have no idea what you're talking about, I truly do mean it.
I'll show you after.
Okay.
He also played Benthic Two Tubes, which we will see Benthic Two Tubes very soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two Tubes,
so
folks.
Aiden Cook will probably be back playing Two Tubes again. So, yeah. So great stuff. Sarah is a Quad Paw fan confirmed.
No,
there we go.
No,
I apologize. Actually, Edrio is Two Tubes. Benthic is somebody else. They're two different characters, apparently.
There are multiple. There are multiple Two Tubes. It's like there are 4 tubes. You know what 4 is? Dr. Quadpa.
Yeah. I didn't know these are. Oh, they're both referred to as Two Tubes. Okay.
Yeah, which really doesn't help anybody.
Doesn't make it
here.
easy. How do they know if they're writing the names on their underwear? How do they know which underwear is which? I don't know. Anyways,
we've strayed too far.
Sorry, Two Tubes.
We got it. We got to end the episode.
Oh, sorry, Two Tubes. I Warriors as well. Oh, shucks, Two Tubes.
Okay, my question for you as we finish this episode, which we are not talking about Two Tubes anymore, is this next arc the Saw arc?
Yes, 1,000%. Yes.
Yeah. Are we finally going to get the dinner party?
Yes. Please? Yeah, I think this is the dinner party arc. I think it's the Saw Gerrera arc. But also, I could see it maybe, actually, you know what? I could see it not being the Saw Gerrera arc because we still need to get Luthen off of Coruscant.
Oh, that's a great point.
You know, like when does he go up against that big Imperial frigate, and when does he have to make his escape from the TIE fighters is my question. Is it next episode? Deidre is going to be on his case for sure. And also, like, when is Cyril Karn in his like little tuxedo thing? I don't know, his like suit and tie.
Oh, you're right. He wasn't in a suit and tie in this episode. He wasn't in this episode at all. I mean, we didn't get really any Deidre. So we need his little suit and tie, his stupid little suit and tie, this little pathetic man.
Isn't it? It's so fascinating though. Like, even though we talk about this, like, I'm not going to speculate beyond the 5 minutes we're talking about it here. I'm just going to let it all happen and see what happens.
That's what I was talking about earlier. I was like, yeah, I mean, what expectations did you have? I was like, none.
There's no who are raised parents in this situation. We're just having fun.
Right. I feel so satisfied whenever we kind of get the story that's going to be given to us. I feel like they're treating the story with care, allowing each moment to fill the time that they've granted it, and give each moment its time. And I feel really good about it, man. I don't know what else to say. Feel good. I get done watching the episode and I'm like, yeah, was good.
Good soup. For sure.
Good soup indeed.
Well, that is all for us this week here on Andor Candor. I think we're about wrapped up, Sarah. So for those of you listening, you can find Sarah and I and all of our Andor ramblings and beyond on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Goodreads, you name it, all those places. You can also follow the podcast as well. And if you'd be so kind, leave us a review if you enjoyed the episode, and subscribe to our feed because we got more Andor on the way. We got like 6 more episodes. We're at the halfway point.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. We're like halfway there, living on a prayer. We also have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1.
We're gonna need the prayers, let me tell you.
And you join today, you can help us achieve our start to 69 more times. I'm kidding. But really,
maybe not.
we're very. Well, we are seriously very grateful to our patrons, and they really help make this show happen in ways that you don't necessarily see on the when you're listening to the podcast. So thank you to Amy, Brian with an I, Brian with a Y, Cheryl, Clay, Danny, Davis, Dylan, Huang, Jen, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Levi, Lucy, Lindsay, Randy, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Sky Talker, Stephen, Travis, and Tom. We are very grateful for all of you, and we're so grateful to everybody who takes the time out of their day to listen to us ramble for an hour about Andor. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being here. Hope you're having a lovely, lovely day.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Sarah. So for all of you listening, thank you once again. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.